Welcome, everyone, for joining another episode with the Theory of Change, where I have special guests coming on talking about how they are impacting the world and how they look at capital as a force for good and how they are bringing change about in this world. Today, we have YPO member, Tiger21 chair, and successful career turned impact investor Florian Kemmerich with us. It's bound to be a super exciting conversation. And at the end of it, I'm actually going to commit to something really big, which I was surprised, to be honest. And I hope you're going to take a lot out of this conversation. We talk about AI, we talk about vocation, we talk about how society and the school system and the workforce is going to transform because of AI. And we're going to talk impact. We're going to talk about life paths. So it's going to be very, very interesting. The information provided is intended solely for educational and informational purposes. It does not constitute legal, financial, investment, tax, or professional advice of any kind. Any opinions expressed are general in nature and are not tailored to the specific circumstances of any individual or entity. Before making any decisions based on this information, you should conduct your own due diligence and consult with a qualified professional advisor. Let's go. Florian Kemmerich, it is a pleasure to host you on Theory of Change today. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me. And I'm curious about our conversation. And you are a special person, and I'm glad to be with you.
Thank you so much. That's the honor is all mine. And I have to let everyone know that the idea for the name of this podcast is actually because of a conversation you were having on a podcast. You're a founding member.
I'm honored. This is beautiful. Wow.
Yeah, because it gave me a neat idea how to structure the conversations and how to invite the guests and talk about everyone's perspective on how they want to drive change. Everybody's got to have a theory of change. So I want to give the audience a quick overview of who you are. And you're a very accomplished professional in the medical field. You started in marketing and you went all the way up to VP, had a great career with B. Brown, and you've been traveling all over the world. You've had places where you stayed in Mexico. You're a YPO member for as long as you probably can remember. You're a post-exit founder, community member. And so you turned impact investor and you have written a book about your story and you're very vocal about this change, how it came about. You kind of hit the end of your career. What's next? You pivoted and you're vocating. That's something I think you should bring our readers up to speed on what it is. And then I would like to go into our conversation of today about a global perspective on impact investing, right? And what's happening at the front lines, especially with AIs. With that being said, Florian, thank you for being with us today, and over to you.
Thank you, Benjamin. Yeah, from a helicopter view. So I started my career, first 15 years in a healthcare corporation. Yeah, and climbed up the ladder. My background is business administration and marketing. And so I was always confronted in terms of growth stages of businesses, usually smaller ones, then multiple countries, then, for example, European-wide, then also went to Latin America, the Latin American continent, the subsidiaries, and so on, and always helping and looking at growth stages of companies, how to invigorate them, how to boost the sales, because that's my background. I look at companies, brands, and products, how to increase the perceived value, which usually leads to more partnerships or more sales, more money from an investment if it's a company, and also more transactions. So I've happened to do many transactions in my life and also several turnarounds, initially in the corporate life with some of the subsidiaries, or areas not performing to put them back on growth stage. And at the age of 33, I had the success my parents wanted me to have. I was running a company, having a family and a house. And then I did a coaching in the company. My boss actually said, Florian, why don't you do, your high potential? You want to fine tune certain things on your skill set. I said, okay, perfect. Let's do a coaching. So I did this coaching, and the coaching was actually of psychotherapy. And so I was confronted with my inner child and the adult Florian. And initially it was really strange. What is this? Yeah. But once I was confronted in there, I said, hold a second. Who am I? Which life am I living? I know I'm successful according to, the society. And that was a pivot. And then I decided to leave corporate, my golden handcuffs, and with a family and so on. It's not an easy decision to do. I went into personal development methodologies to learn about myself and into an entrepreneurial path where I did some, turnarounds of some companies, fundraising, I did some startups and these things, still for a certain period of time in the healthcare sector, because that's where I started. Yeah. But then I learned when I moved to Geneva, over a decade ago, I learned about impact investing and the power of capital as a force for good. And I pivoted. For me, it was an amazing one. The aha moment of that, why I was so fascinated with impact investing, happened actually still at my time when I was running the company, the subsidiary of the healthcare company in Mexico and responsible for Latin America. Because we had a CSR arm, we were donating material. You do this to do some good. So patient associations. And also, I happened to create a non-for-profit continuous medical education foundation. That was a project I kicked off. And with that one, we supported also certain causes. And there was a extramural surgery program. Basically, it's an OR, an operating room on a truck going into remote areas of Mexico, including the jungle. And so we were donating materials, all the instruments, different IV solutions, all the products we were, from industry we were providing to hospitals for these programs. And once the doctor said, Florian, why don't you join? I said, oh, nice. So I joined. I'm not a doctor, but I grew up in the OR, early days, instrumenting surgeries, hips and knees and spine, endoscopy towers. This is how I grew up in the OR, as a technical expert, to support from the industry side, to support the doctors in the operations. And then there was a child which had a cliff lip, was operated on. You see this little mouth draped, the lights on. And I took a picture and I put it on the front, on the newsletter of the foundation. And I felt so great. I was helping there, not asking for anything, giving my time for free. And of course, we from the industry donating our material. And I learned 6 months later that the child afterwards died. It died because there was no healthcare. There was no doctor. There was no pharmacy. And it struck me, hold a second, how can I be so selfish and privileged, wanting to shine and feel good, when actually I didn't do good? Because actually nobody wants to be helped. Nobody wants to be pitied. We all want a chance to climb up the ladder ourselves. And so therefore my lesson was, first of all, I have to temper my ego and I have to understand and put me in the shoes of the others. And so when I moved to Geneva and I met the founder of Bamboo Capital, who was having difficulties with the company at its time and the fundraising and the repositioning. And he invited me to join him on the journey. I said, this is beautiful. Capital as a force for good. If we would have invested in the jungle these years, many years before, child would have not to die because healthcare would have been there. And so for me, that was a learning that poverty uplift, nobody wants to be uplifted. Economic empowerment instead is a solution. So it's a phrase I use saying, You can give a man or a person a fish. You can teach a person how to fish, but you need also, and very important, to invest in its fishing business. That's when you sustain and support the entire community, and the livelihood of the people. And that is the essence of impact investing, with the intentionality of capital and the additionality of capital. So you want to have capital flowing where normally it wouldn't flow, with profit, with returns, can be market returns or concession returns. And for me, that was the aha moment where I said, okay, I want to do this and I want to support this. So Benjamin, you see the link was a trigger and a learning in the past on myself, because way back when I was 33, I recognized that I've been the absent subject of my own education. My education gave me the tools to make a living, not to live my life, because it's very different if you're opportunistically educated to look outside, or if you say, this is something, a calling I have, a contribution I want to give to humanity or to the planet at whatever scale, is very different. And this is the one which was triggered for me to go out of corporate, have my roller coaster life. I ended up doing impact investing. And then many people were coming to me saying, Florian, you do impact. How can I do impact? And I asked them, what is your vocation? And they say, I don't know. So that's when I then help them some exercises to go inside to figure what they want to do, and then to match it with their professional skill set to start professionally dedicating yourself to your vocation, which I call vocating. And these people I helped, a lot of accomplished people initially because of YPO, but then also the younger generation. They say, could you talk to my daughter or my son? And it's the same exercise. And again, I would have loved to do this at the age of 18, 20 or 22, 33, the family, and then to figure out 10 years, which way to go and how to learn and how to do this. And these people asked me, Florian, can you write a book? And that's how I ended up to write a book and publish the first of 3 books, which is the initial one is Leadership as a Force for Good, how to align your purpose with your profession. I just finished the second book. It's Business as a Force for Good, how to align your purpose with your business or your organization. And the third one is then, which closes the loop, how to align your purpose with your capital. So this is the story around Benjamin. And so all of that in the 7 steps I developed, to help people to start vocating. The second step is what your podcast is focusing on, which is the theory of change. So once you have a vocation, the next thing is, what can I do with this vocation? So you develop a theory of change and then take it forward to make it your profession.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. It was great to hear it one more time, completely wrapped up. And there are so many things we could unpack, and I am tempted to go in all 10 directions at the same time. I'm not going to do that because I don't want to, I want to have a smooth sort of streamlined conversation. And I'm really tempted to go forward with the capital side. We have a lot of questions, and I'm still going to take a risk here and go with my gut. So I imagine our audience being LPs, family offices, principals, next generation, rising generation, heirs of family wealth within the context of the great wealth transfer. They could be in their 20s, 30s. It could be a philanthropic arm who is listening, a philanthropic advisor who is listening, and sort of standing on the sideline, maybe mulling over, how can I talk to my parents? How can I talk to the investment committee about using our family wealth, our capital as a force for good? And I would like to start there with this person in mind who is asking themselves, maybe, what are the questions I should be asking myself? What are the questions I'm not even thinking about? I have this urge, and please combine it with your 7 steps if you like. Combine it with all your experience as an impact investor, as somebody who has worked intensively on deals. And then maybe let's start from this very, very from the edges perspective. And then let's try to zoom in over time to take the audience onto a journey into both your system of thinking, your theory of change, and give them some ideas on how to think about impact investing. Let's start there, please.
Great, Benjamin. So if you have a helicopter view and you look at Mother Earth, and we have two big challenges. One is humanity is going towards 10 billion people, and these 10 billion people have to be fed and want to have a decent life. The other part is we are now in the midst of another industrial revolution, which is the AI revolution. So people were saying, oh, yeah, we've been in industrial revolution since the internet time. That was not a revolution. It was incremental still. Now it's exponential at scale with AI, and is a fundamental impact of how humanity deals with the survival of a scarcity of productivity for food, water, and the resultant. And the other is what is life with as one small part within an AI driven society. And if you understand that and you want to see and contribute to these challenges, that's the first step. It goes back to my 7 steps. The first step is, what is there where you're concerned about and you would like to contribute to? And from there, which theories of change do you actually want to zoom in to resolve? So rather than just investing my money for the sake of financial safety and incremental wealth, which is still the case and you should do, you should not change that. But to be understanding is, how to generate returns? Is it subtractive or sustainable? So this is the problem we have here psychologically. We are trained to say, first you make money and then you do good.
Mm-hmm.
And this comes, the root cause is that success defines, or that society defines success by fame and fortune, which is a fantasy. It's not your intuition. It is not love and contribution. Fame and fortune is because we are fragile. We're born fragile as little babies, and we need to be nurtured and protected. And then we develop egos, and we all need egos. We all have the intention also to make a difference in the world, which is a certain extent an ego mechanism. So now, if you're aware that the protection of your ego is, I need money to sustain myself in life, and I want to be recognized, loved, appreciated. But these two are not mechanisms for self-fulfillment. They nurture your ego, nothing else. And you can see the effect. When people die, generally, they regret not having lived and loved enough. Too busy with fame and fortune, Steve Jobs and others. So that comes because we are brought up in this way. And you can see also with a lot of people which are extremely successful, once they are either going towards retire and they cannot retire, or big sports people, famous people, once the peak is over, they fall in a cliff and generally tend towards depressions or mental health issues, drugs, because your ego is no longer fed. So the reason of you being valuable and you to shine is gone. So if you flip from that fantasy, this imagination of to be someday something, someone, and even if you're not fully fulfilled, it's very different to your intuition, to basically love and contribute, which keeps you back. That one of the biggest factors for longevity is your social interaction, which means your community. in whatever layer where we are, and today's technology is easier. So you need to understand is what is it, the engine you drive? Yeah, and this is my third book. When you have money and you want to deploy money, how you want to do this in a way where you can contribute to yourself, of course, but specifically to the world. And so this is one fundamental change, and I invite people to reflect inside internally. That goes back to the inner child, and the adult then to help to structure it. Yeah, but the desire comes from the inner child. And that's exercise to go through. Usually people have an epiphany saying, okay, yes, you're right. And you have an awareness, and then you do things differently. Or you see things differently. You might still do what you do, and you're still good in your profession maybe, but it's very different if you became, let's say, a doctor because you have a great status in society and you make good money, but you do not have a vocation to actually cure people. That's very different. Or if you're a teacher, you became maybe a teacher because it's a good and safe job, but if you do not have a vocation to teach, that's you see a lot of teachers have mental health problems over the long run because you're doing just something, and if it's not your vocation, it's really hard. So that goes back to matching the inner child's desires with the outer world's, the adult's component. So this is in the money side you can do. And if you do this now, when AI is coming, it's even worse because we are brought up externally oriented. So now what AI happens, and you can see all the news all over. Number one is, it's said that half a billion people will lose their jobs. And it's not the workers. It is the services. It is the lawyers. It is the doctors. It is the white collar. It is the financial services industries, those. So this is a big change. But also the young people, where you spend 5 years in a university to get your degree and your master. And then normally you have your entry-level job with McKinsey, some of the corporations. It is going away. So what is the reaction? We already seen that Gen Z and beyond, they're all attached and glued to the device all the time online. And now it's even worse because mankind will ask the machine what to do and where to go. So the people will subjugate themselves to the machine, which is very dangerous. And you can see that also by peaking mental health problems, suicidal problems, or conflicts, because you get manipulated into extremes. Because it's magnified, either it's extremely beautiful or it's really, really ugly, and then people react. So if you don't flip this around and you go back to your inner child where you say, there's something I want to do and I'm compelled to do, which is bigger than I. And now I will use technology to cater it, because the beautiful side of technology is it has never been as easy, as fast, and as cheap to actually innovate, to do something new. That's why it's said that the world's population right now, 1% of the world's populations have an entrepreneurial approach. That's expected to be 20% because people will just do differently and be productive differently and generate wealth and productivity differently. So this is a fundamental shift. For me, it goes back to the human agency. It goes back also, why would you do impact investing, or why would you be concerned about how you generate the returns of your money? And this is the piece where once you have the awareness and you dig into it, you find new pathways. Or you can change the core values of a company, still doing the same, looking at a stakeholder value, not just a shareholder value. And then the net promoter score goes up, cohesion goes up, people are proud to be there, and not just proud because it's a great marketing story, but proud because you contribute to the world. And so there are many things where once you have the awareness and you go this path, and this is nothing to do with I want to do good, in the sense. If you look at your life and you want to realize yourself and having lived a meaningful life, once you include your inner child, things change significantly. And so you are forced to, now being disrupted by AI. And AI gives a possibility to go back, which was my original pain point. My pain point was I found out I was the absent subject of my own education because nobody trained me or trained my inner child only to be the skill set to sustain life and be successful on fame and fortune, which is what society and education teaches you. But now with AI, once you have the awareness, you look at things very differently and you use technology for your purpose in a very different way. And that is including absolutely the part on the money side, which goes to the intentionality of the investment, maybe the additionality, but specifically the intentionality. Is it subtractive or is it sustainable? The way I generate my returns.
So maybe I'll share just a tiny amount of, because there's something that resonates with me, the inner child dialogue. This podcast here is, to me, an expression of an amalgamation of different aspects of what I liked to do as a child, who I was as a child, what gave me joy as a child. And I remember it had to do with cameras. I remember I was always fascinated by people, and I kind of love hearing stories, and I love to learn, and I love this feeling of being curious and being in awe and mesmerized, and sharing with the world. Look what I've done. Look what we just recorded, right? Don't you want to have a look? Don't you think this is interesting? and so this podcast is really a project of me fulfilling myself, of not just pursuing an ego journey of let me get famous and let me make money, but also it is aligned with what gives me emotional goodness, I would like to say. And I think that's the backstop when things get difficult on the outside. You know, you lose your job, loved ones that die, maybe you lose your health, then the emotional core, be it how you talk to yourself, how you treat yourself, the way you interact with people. Do you have people in your life? All of that is your backstop so you don't spiral out of control. And so I think it's very valuable what you're describing. And from here on, I would like to give you sort of the choice. Do you want to go left or do you want to go right? Like, shall we go more into your understanding of the effects of AI and how impact can help? Should we talk more about educating the audience on evaluating maybe impact investments or impact funds? Or is there another topic that we should go into that is very pertinent right now?
Look, it's a great, first of all, I love your reflection on why you do this podcast. Because you were just, I could see it, you were asking yourself, it is my fantasy or is it my intuition? Yeah, and this is really the exercise where people get humble and true to themselves. And yes, we have an ego component here because you want to make a difference in the world. I want to make a difference in the world. But then there's a fine notion. What's the scale of the adult, trained to be famous and fortunate. And then the catering to the inner child. What's the intuition? So it's a little bit like I love to play music. I love to sing. I have my band, for many, many years. Yeah. And I never trained and never took classes. It just happened when I was younger and I put people together and we created a band and we went from there. Because, and that's the question is, for me, it wasn't the goal to be a famous musician. It is to play music. My friends know me. I walk in a hotel, because I traveled quite substantially. And I come in and there's a band playing in the hotel bar and I go there and I ask if I can play and sing a song with them. And I just do this. I have my moment of connection and these things and I go down and, have my glass of wine and life is good. And that's it. And I do this constantly because it's just, for me, music is part of my life. Yeah, it gives like a therapy for me. And when I play with my band, sometimes we play at bars or with parties, but we never rehearse. We just get together and we jam. and we are in our zone and we have fun, because this is the part of the intuition. So that's the notion also where you asking yourself, why do I do this podcast? Yeah. And getting the message out on theories of change can trigger the inner child in a positive way. Yeah, because what is it what you want to solve for? If you're only on the outer shell, you might go do it for the wrong reason. Okay. And this is the part where also you will conduct your podcast differently, being centered on your inner child, humble and coming through and serving, not helping. Because when you help, you are in a privileged position. When you serve, you put yourself, actually at the lower level, if you want to see so. At least a peer, but normally it's slightly lower. I'm here to serve you. And serving is on the intuition. Helping is on a privilege. Yeah. And so those are the exercises I go through with people. So from an awareness perspective, because you will do things differently, your voice changes. The way you will do your interviews differently if you're on a service level. And so this is where I love to see your reflection. Now, from here, we can take it in different ways. But for me, it's always, why would you want to trigger change in the world? Yeah, the theory of change on your intentionality to solve for some challenge of the world goes back of a balance between your push to make a difference in the world and your intuition to be and to contribute and love. Yeah, and this goes the same way. We can go now, of course, into all the nuances of impact investing, where there's a lot to talk and peel, because you are between the for-profit and non-for-profit world, and you can be extremely on the for-profit side and very commercial, which is fine, or you can slide gradually over to the concessionary side, where you are on the donation side. But even on the donation side, you need to be careful. Is it to nurture your ego, or is it because you want to serve? Which is again different, not help. Yeah. And so that's the notion where I'm not disqualifying helping is bad or wrong, but there's a notion to your ego, because that's the balance. And if you have this conversation with people, considering what to do with their life, with their money, and particularly, for example, you might, you've talked about my close to 20 years in YPO, where it's about business leaders. I happen to also be part of a community called Tiger21. And Tiger21 is ultra high net worth. Yeah, where I serve as a chair, a group I put together, and I'm in Switzerland and I'm working with. Yeah. Not as a member, but as a chair to steer a group. And you can see within that community where 85% of that community is first-time wealth, that people think afterwards, I've done well, I've done an exit. What do I do with my life? What do I do with my money? Yeah, and a lot of them do philanthropy, which is all good. But there's a notion, how do you go back to your inner child? How do you have a decision? What you do is self-fulfilling, not nurturing fame and fortune only. Yeah. So those are the components where impact investing is actually between the pure for-profit world and the not-for-profit world.
We'll be right back with our conversation, but first we're going to take a quick break to do a shout out to the sponsor of today's episode, David Clark, my friend with Integris Aviation. And David is special to me because he's on a mission of adding 30 to 40 nights per year to the balance sheet of busy parents spending more time with their children. Imagine you don't have to exclude the success of your business with being with your family because of private aviation. If you can spend an additional 30 to 40 nights per year with your children, bonding with them, whether that's during their crucial first years of life or whether in later stages you go to their piano recitals or rehearsals that they do, you have this opportunity to work on your business, fly out in the morning, come back in the evening, and get these important meetings done, not at the price paying for your family. So if you want to learn how private aviation can help you bond with the next generation, create truly that multi-generational perspective for your family, which I'm a great fan of, then please go and check out David. I will leave the details in the show notes so you can find him. And then let's go back to the episode. So I have an idea. I'm going to hijack this conversation for my own self-serving purposes. And one of my ideas is, it goes back to the example that you gave of the child who had the open lip surgery. And you mentioned that without the infrastructure of healthcare in the jungle, one is helping, but one is not serving. So the community in the jungle would be served better by investors who help build the healthcare infrastructure. And one of the topics I'm interested in is nation building. So some of the network I'm building is around policymakers and platforms where policymakers and capital owners come together. Now, one of my wishes would be to have these waste burning facilities in more parts of the world, because I'm truly shocked that in most countries of the world, waste is either dumped into a river or into a landfill. And Switzerland is one of the few, with Germany probably, that have waste burning facilities, and they're turning waste into heat and therefore electricity. So I was wondering if you could sort of give us a short rundown, a short version of your thoughts on how to build, or how to think about, how to talk to people about where do we start in building nations, building economies, where people then have the value of not living in their waste, but actually there was a for-profit company with a social impact orientation that built a waste burning facility. They have the trucks picking up everything, everything that comes with it. How would one go about this from an impact or perspective?
So beautiful. Lots to unpack in systemic change, okay, and impact investing. And so first of all, I applaud that you're looking at the loss of biodiversity caused by human waste. Yeah. Now, fine notion. Are you aware that Switzerland is overproportionally bad with plastic and packaging use? So the CO2 footprint of Swiss people, is a big one outside of Switzerland. Yeah. So we might think about that we're doing things well or better in Switzerland than elsewhere. Fine notion. Yeah, we have the money and we get everything nicely wrapped and packaged and clean and the highest quality shipped to Switzerland. Yeah. And then the waste not is only burned, it's also exported. Yeah, that's big. And you have the case also of rich countries exporting their waste to the poor countries and dumping it there.
Heard about that.
Yeah.
I mean, even more the reason to build these facilities maybe in Africa. I heard Africa is like buying all the they're being paid to take the waste of the first or the developed economies. I'm like, are you kidding me? That's not possible. There's a great company that fishes plastic out of the ocean. You've seen their videos on YouTube, and I think we should have the same for physical, like landfill type of waste. It would be amazing.
Yeah, and it's funny because you look at the CO2 footprint, for example, of a glass bottle is huge compared to a plastic bottle. But the plastic bottle, the problem is they end up in a large majority in a landfill, a river, or the ocean. Yeah, and so also you cite a company. I'm, for example, a big fan of Plastic Bank. Plastic Bank has 60,000 people picking up plastic they pay these people for picking up the plastic. Yeah, because they use it and sell it as a trading to recycle whatever can be there done. So this is an approach. Or you can look at another company called Sea to Sea. Sea from seeing, sea the ocean. Yeah, from the ocean to seeing. Because they collect plastic at the oceans, at the beaches. A lot of all these fisher nets and make beautiful glass frames and also watch houses now out of that high end. Yeah. That's also a solution on circular economy, which you're talking about, to recycle as much as you can. And as you say, to incinerate them or to do something with it rather than just landfill or in the ocean, because ocean, this is something I'm also caring about because, the certain fish you shouldn't eat anymore. The big fish growing like tuna fish have a lot of mercury and also microplastics in there. And now it's going back into our body. And so there's a lot to unpeel. Now, as you're talking systemic change and as you're talking with policymakers, yeah, there are two ways. You can incentivize people by a carrot or by a stick. One of the criticisms I do with impact investing in Europe is with SFDR rules is it's a stick. Impact investors, when they go chapter 8 or chapter 9, technically, an impact investing fund, the burden of regulatory compliance, and if not people go after you and you might end in jail. I'm saying this is really serious. Makes a burden of a cost layer on top of doing impact investing versus not caring and investing whatever, mainstream dark side financials, you're not punished. So you're pushed out of proportion in terms of doing impact investing because the government puts a burden on the ones wanting to do or doing impact investing. And you had some big impact investors which basically went out of the regulation saying, okay, we don't say it's impact investing, we just do our own things because it's way too expensive and way too cumbersome. We still do what we want to do, but we'll no longer have the label because it doesn't make sense. It's just too expensive. That's then when you talk to policymakers is how do you incentivize? How do you facilitate? So how do you provide a carrot rather than a stick?
Okay.
And the government does sticks with regulations and carrots very often with subsidies or with, let's say, incentives on the tax side and lower.
Right.
But it's a fine balance because we see ourselves privileged, for example, with waste or the way Switzerland, how clean it is, and how we care about our beautiful Switzerland, not understanding that our footprint overall is not good. It's actually one of the bad ones overall. So those are the things to consider when you go in the path. However, I can only applaud, Benjamin, your passion around biodiversity loss and to mitigate that in the sense of the treatment of waste overall. Yes, so I applaud your initiative to mitigate or support biodiversity on the theory of change of waste treatment, waste management, which is what you're looking, in a sense, you're trying to solve here. And you can treat that from an impact investing part also. It can be infrastructure impact investing. It can be companies supporting, like Plastic Bank, for example, which are the financial mechanisms. It can be C2C, with a company specific doing certain things. You have several of those really amazing initiatives. I also remember I met at Davos, where we last time met Benjamin. I met with Omar, who runs Fabric Aid. It's not US Aid, AID, it's Fabric AID. Yeah. And they recycle used garment, treat it, correct it, and sell it again. In areas at a very different price, but in a very nice way. Yeah, with more and more initiatives behind. Yeah, and they're really growing, specifically in the GCC area. And it's beautiful how that, what that as a business, actually generates and does in terms of garment we all use, and you have some of the brands which encourage us to buy every year a different, style and different things as the fashion changes, and it's dumped. Some of the companies, of course, now try to also collect it and take it back. But again, garment, our clothes is a huge polluter. Yeah. But okay, we need clothes. So those are the things where once you go in a field or a specific sector, or in your terms, in our terms, focus on a specific theory of change, yeah, you can peel the onion in very different ways, and you can see how you can support that initiative, which goes back to your inner child, back to your desire to contribute to Mother Nature.
There is a last element I would like us to zoom in on. And we met in Davos, and I think it's a fantastic place to meet a lot of different people in a very short amount of time because everybody's coming there. And I know they dress up the city really funnily, I would like to say. It was like, it's like Disneyland for grown-ups, somebody said. It's interesting. I see there's a lot of effort, and so yeah, I guess one could make fun of it, but there's a huge misconception also, like from a impact perspective. I think the energy, it's bristling. So there's a lot of good people like yourselves, a lot of people that you and I know that come there and who want to do good. I would like to spend a little bit of time on the human side, on the relationship side. It's what got me initially interested in the capital side, the investor layer, because you have the companies, and then you have the employees, and then you have the families, so to speak. I would like you to give your point of view on best practices and successes and maybe failures on relationship building, and you always have, like, you personally have also the GP side, where you're trying to bring money into your company, Human Planet, but you're also an LP where you distribute money. So talk to us about building relationships. How does that work from your perspective? Whether that is LP to LP, or whether that's GP to LP, or maybe how that is GP to less so GP to the founder. I think there's a lot of material that's covering that, but sort of within the capital layer, I'd be super interested to hear a little bit about your journey and your experiences and your reflections.
Yes, so I happen to raise quite a sizable amount of money over my years, and really from donations up to mainstream things. Yeah, from all sorts of participants. And as you say, the relations, because why would you be in Davos? Why do I go every year to Davos? Not inside the World Economic Forum to be with the government. That's not. But everybody else is in town. So you have the hundreds of side events happening. It's one very busy week where you go and you meet 200, 250 people. Then you go away, and then you do follow-ups afterwards. So really from that side where you get a moment, can be just 10, 15 minutes, and then you move on and you follow up. And so it's meaningful and it's very productive. But the same applies also within impact investing. You have a lot of nuances. You can go more commercial, less commercial. You can go in any asset class. You can go in any geography. You can go in any sector. You can structure this as plain vanilla. You can go in blended finance. With Human Planet, we do also results-based finance, impact-linked finance. We have done impact bonds, humanitarian impact bond, refugee impact bond, different impact bonds, over 20 over the years of the company. So this is where there's a lot to unpack. And this is where I think the power of communities, actually, of relations in communities. One community I'm very active in is YPO. We have 38,000 members in the world who manage a business, 20 million revenue plus. Yeah, it's about 22 million people are employed by our members. It should be whatever, a third or fourth biggest nation. I mean, if you take a GDP of our members, as independently. So it's very powerful. And there you have networks, and you have the different chapters, you have different initiatives. And I've done several things also there for the impact side, impact cause, to trigger YPOs to do more than having a family and a bank account. What's the contribution? And the beauty of these communities is that you learn from each other, you exchange. It's not necessarily meant to have to do business one-to-one, but when you look at doing, and the same applies for Tiger21, where it's the people who are not necessarily running a company, but in having their own wealth and decide on what to invest in, what to do with the wealth, is also a discussion to have. And there's a subset also of many people doing philanthropy, some doing impact investing, and it's something to learn from. And therefore, I can only encourage people to go into communities. Yeah, you have Tonic, for example,
Yes.
as one of the communities. Yeah, you have things I'm getting involved in, or is breakfast, Impact for Breakfast, It's a network of 6,000 members doing certain things and meeting and exchanging. Yeah. My friend Michael Meehan he has a Forum for Impact, which is more high net worth, smaller ones. It's very nice because you're 40, 50 people, you do one day together with a dinner before and after. And after that, all of them in the room. And he does 8 of those in the world per year. So it's another way of really to foster and for people, and he has clear outcomes of people doing something, coming together. And so you see these communities can be technology based in a different sense. I'm part of a virtual advisory board also is another community of people looking to sit on board and provide value to companies. Yeah, it's another notion of, and another community to get involved in. And that makes it then interesting because you learn and you bring yourself in. And the exchange is a very rich one, especially on something which is greater than you, is your cause, is your calling, is your theory of change. And this is where it becomes interesting because one of the big pieces is on the additionality of capital, which I'm very much focused on my partners and within Human Planet, but also on the companies I sit on the board, is how do you provide money where normally it wouldn't flow? So it's not only the intentionality on the theory of change of capital, what you want to trigger change, but actually how do you make it flow when it wouldn't normally flow? So it's the risk, reward, return adjustment. Yeah, is it an impact bond? Is it a blended finance mechanism? Yeah, how to make it attractive for investors. And there's a lot to tell about because it's so-called innovative finance area where we are focusing on capital mobilization, on a theory of change, different theories of change. Yeah, and we do this for corporates, for investors, for NGOs, INGOs, and multilaterals. Yeah, so between the for-profit, non-for-profit, and in between where we sit and try to, to look to go from teaching fishing to investing in the fishing. So that's the part where relations, community, and trust. And I think if you understand a reason for someone to write a check and invest is only emotional. There's nothing rational. And your emotions pivot between fear, not sure to invest, too risky, and FOMO. Oh, I really want to. I love it. Yeah. So therefore, the notion of trust. Do I trust these people? Do I trust this organization? Do I trust to invest my money? Is huge. But then the other part is, it's a narrative. What is the change I'm triggering? How do I nurture my inner child? Yeah, or do my actions actually correspond to my inner child? And that's the part where between fear and FOMO as an investor, yes, you do the due diligence. Yes, you check all the downsides and no cadavers in the basement and the background of the people and the KYC and everything. This is just to tick the box. The decision to write a check is emotional because you are at the end catering to your inner child. You could cater because I want to be investing in this company and this company will be famous, but it's not your company. You're just an investor. So the return is saying, I have invested in Facebook. Yeah. I have invested in, whatever, OpenAI to do something. You make a lot of money, but it's actually not your success. It's someone else's. Yeah. So, but if you do something where you resolve something for the world, where you contribute, you can measure and you have the results, that is very powerful. And it's an emotional side, which goes back to the inner child. So it's once you have the awareness, you can actually balance your adult and your child in any decision to do. going forward.
You wrote an article about on Human Planet in the blog, and the mechanisms of how do we actually do this. Like if an investor family member is now excited about this, or an entrepreneur and says, I want to start doing this, there needs to be a way how these mechanisms are structured. And we've talked for almost an hour. We cannot possibly open up another chapter here, but it sounds like you have a lot of experience in this, and anybody will be able to reach out to you if they need help with this, if they have questions about this, if they want to dive deeper into this. And you and I, we had a call yesterday preparing for today, and we already said you're going to be back on the podcast, so we will see what we can talk about then. So it was wonderful. I thank you very much. I think we're going to land this plane right now. There has been a lot, and I certainly learned a lot. I can already see my gears switching and changing up, so I can adjust more of what I'm doing and align it with from the inside to the outside, really being on purpose, being on this well balance between ego driven, outside structured theoretical logic, and then the inner child intuitive side, who I talk to, how I correspond, how I frame things, and who I really get involved with, who is my community. So thank you. You've given me a lot today. Thank you.
Benjamin, my pleasure. It was a great conversation. And again, for me, what excites me is to have this conversation on your inner motivations to actually wanting to trigger change, and then how to structure it to trigger change. How do you address your intentionality, the additionality on a theory of change?
So I'm gonna go out on a limb here, because I'm a little bit of a risk taker. I like it. It gives me a kick. And doing something in public has its benefits in a way. And I've seen that manifestations work. Like, you hold something in your mind or in your heart for an extended period of time. It sometimes can be several years, maybe decades. But I'm gonna say this, like, okay, now I have to be careful. Basically, I want to I want to see that one of these plants is built, a waste burning facility, maybe in Africa, I don't know. And I want to have really a systemic, I want to think about this thoroughly with engineers and civil planners and governments and everyone. I remember what you said about the Swiss CO2 imprint. And we personally started to separate and recycle plastic because the Germans have been doing it for years. And I was always like, why can't we do it in Switzerland? So now we have the opportunity. We start doing it. I feel very great about it, but I want to do something in that space. So I'm going to commit to building that plant. Don't know how yet, but let's make it happen. I'm going to make it happen.
Beautiful. Be careful of your adult sandbagging your initiatives, because I hear you. Okay. Maybe not. Maybe it's too much. Maybe don't take the maybes out. Okay. If you have a calling, yeah, just have in mind, it is the same work to do something big and something small.
Yeah.
Why would you do small?
Yeah.
Go for it. Go with big eyes in it, because it's actually, for me, just my experiences, it's easier to raise big amounts of money than small amounts of money.
Very good.
Yeah. So therefore, don't let your inner child cater to it and say, okay, I take this challenge and I do this. And it's beautiful that you do this publicly here. Yeah. But let's not, okay, jeopardize your outer child, not the outer shell, the child itself. Yeah, exactly.
So I cut the sandbags, going to fill that hot air balloon, and then cut the rope, that ties the basket to the earth. So, oh my God, but okay. It's going to be okay. Thank you so much, and speak to you soon. Okay.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Bye, my friend. Bye.
Bye, Pen.